Okay, Boker Tov. So we're Masechet Beitza Daf Lamed Amud Bet. Let's just go back quickly and see the Mishnah. This is what we started discussing last time. Um, the Mishnah at the top of the Amud said, "Ein notlin etzim min hasukah ela min hasamuchla." Right, so that you cannot take wood. We're talking about taking wood, presumably from the schach of a sukkah, although we explained that right now we're not necessarily talking about a sukkah of Sukkot, we're just talking about a booth as such, right? You can't take the wood directly from there, from the roof, only from that which is adjacent. The reason why you can't do that is because by doing so, you are destroying the roof, you are dismantling it, and that is going to be soter ohel, which is going to be forbidden on Yom Tov. Okay, so Rashi pointed out, yeah, we're talking about Pesach or Atzeret, talking about the other Yom Tovim. Suppose it could be Shabbat as well, but we're not dealing with a sukkah of Chag Sukkot, but we're going to get to that. So the Gemara said, "Ma'ishna min sukkah delo kasata lo min hasamuchla delo kasata lo." Excuse me, min hasamuchla nami kasata lo. In other words, says the Gemara, why is it that you can't take directly from the schach from the roof of the sukkah itself, but you can take from that which is samuch? At this point, we understand samuch to mean that it's also on the roof, but it's a very thick. So you're taking out from that which is not actually dismantling the roof itself, but that which is adjacent to it. And the question is, if all of that schach together, all that wood together is essentially going to be batel into one entity. So whatever I'm taking, that would be a prohibition of soter ohel. So answers the Gemara. Two answers. Amar Avira Amar Shmuel. Mai samuch samuch latfanot. First answer we say no. Samuch means samuch latfanot. Samuch does not mean that it's actually part of the roof itself, but it means that it's close to the part of the walls. Right? Rashi said kanima niskafim sivod litfanot. You have upright twigs that are around the walls. Kevan שלא נהרגו מהדופן לא בת לי לגבי דופן, and these are not the walls themselves are all tied together, and these are not tied together, therefore they are not batel, and they are not nullified as part of the walls. That's not similar to that which is samuch to the schach. Shaschach eno alug, because the schach, all the wood and twigs and whatever that you put there, those are not weaved together. And therefore, lefichach hakol shaveh, and therefore everything's the same. Ha'elyon k'tachton schachu, it's all considered schach, and therefore it would be batel. So answer number one is to say no. When you say samuch means samuch ladfanot. Answer number two, Rav Menashe Amar, afilu tema b'she'en samuch ladfanot. Rav Menashe says no. You could say it's even talking about right, not samuch ladfanot, but it's samuch to it's part of the schach itself. Kitanya. But what are we talking about? Kitanya ba'asul yato. You're talking about these bundles of reeds that are tied together, and that's placed on top of the schach. So that is its own. That is considered its own separate, its own separate entity. Okay. So that's just to explain the Nasukah min hasamuchla that we had in the Mishnah. Now we bring a Beitza, and the Beitza says, Tanya Rabbi Chia bar Yosef kamed Rabbi Yochanan, ein notlin eitzim min hasukah ela min hasamuchla, for Rabbi Shimon matir. Okay, so first thing is, so we said the same as our Mishnah, meaning Mishnah just brought us that Mishnah. Yeah, we have it in the name of Tanakam and Rabbi Chia bar Yosef. He says, ein notlin eitzim min hasukah ela min hasamuchla. That's exactly the same is what our Mishnah said. But we have a dissenting opinion, Rabbi Shimon matir. So obviously, if Tanakama says that minas hamuchla is mutar, but it's only from the schach itself that is asur, and Rabbi Shimon matir, meaning Rabbi Shimon is going to say even from the schach is going to be mutar. V'shavin b'sukkah. Now all of that was regarding a sukkah that is not a halachic sukkah, it's not a Chag Sukkot, and our only concern that we're discussing is relating to soter ohel or not. To understand why Rabbi Shimon is not concerned for that, but v'shavin v'shavin b'sukat hachag b'chag she'asura. So when it comes to the sukkah of Chag Sukkot, on Sukkot there, everybody agrees. In other words, the only difference is that there Rabbi Shimon is going to be oser. Whereas Yari is matir, Rabbi Shimon is oseh to take away from the schach of the sukkah and Chag Sukkot. And then says the Breitza, we're going to have to understand exactly what this means. But it says ve'im hitna alea hakol lefi tna'o. If you made a t'nai beforehand, then everything goes according to the t'nai, according to the condition you made. So at this point, we understand that that's talking about sukkot chag b'chag. In other words, on a sukkah which is not on chag, which is not a halachic sukkah. No sukkah, just a sukkah in that sense of it's a nice place that you sit outside. So we have a machloket as to whether on a chag you can take away from the actual schach. Tanakama says no, and Rabbi Shimon says yes. When it comes to the sukkah of chag, the sukkah of Sukkot, so there everybody agrees that we have to be machmir, that we cannot take away, and everybody would agree as well, seemingly, that if we made it tonight, then that would actually be mutar. Okay, so now the Gemara goes on to analyze the brights in a little bit more detail. It says like this. Rabbi Shimon Matir, going back to the Reisha, right? We said Rabbi Shimon Matir is now ask the question, you are dismantling an ohel, you're destroying. How can Rabbi Shimon allow that? So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, acha b'sukkah nofelet askinan, Rabbi Shimon atamei deleit le muktzeh. Now we're talking about, obviously Rabbi Shimon agrees that if the sukkah is standing and now you're going to go take away from the schach and you're going to be dismantling the roof, destroying the sukkah, that you can't do. But if the sukkah has already fallen down, then you can go and you can take the wood, right? I remember this happens all the time. We all know we've all experienced cases of sukkahs falling down. Sukkah falling down doesn't even necessarily mean that the whole thing falls over, but right, just to the extent that it's not a sukkah anymore. So there's no roof anymore. Where it once happened, we have our sukkah on the roof of our building. We have a door that goes out onto the roof. We live on the third floor. And I remember it was maybe last year or the year before, one of the days of Sukkot, we were cleaning up after the meal, and I went back into the Sukkah to go into bench, and I thought, gosh, feels suddenly very sunny in here. And I looked up, and the reason it was so sunny was because the schach had disappeared. It had all blown over. And thankfully, it had not blown over the side of the building, because it could have been very painful for somebody. But anyway, from there we learned that you have to put more things on top of the schach and reinforce it, etc. But the point is, once the sukkah's fallen down, so he says once it's fallen down, and then you're going to go. There's no ohel anymore, so you're not soter any ohel. But what's the problem? The problem is that we have a question of muktzeh. But Rabbi Shimon, who is more lenient about muktzeh, so he does not hold that it's a problem. He doesn't hold that it's muktzeh in the first place. And therefore, that's why he allows it. So when we say Rabbi Shimon Matir, we're talking about a sukkah that's fallen, right? And then he holds that there's no issue of muktzeh. Again, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, acha b'sukkah nofelet askinan. Rabbi Shimon atame deleit lei muktzeh. In other words, the issue is the Chachamim would say you still say it's muktzeh because at least at the beginning of Chag, when Chag came in, it was muktzeh because it was there, because it was part of your sukkah. Now that it's fallen down, it doesn't help me that now I have no use for it. But at the beginning, it was muktzeh. Now Rabbi Shimon is not going to be concerned for that, which we see from the following case. We said Rabbi Shimon Natame delayed lemuktzeh. The Tanya mutar shemen shebanev shebakel asul. Rabbi Shimon matir. If I have a candle, not again as I always say, not a wax candle like nowadays, but the candles of the Mishnah where you have sort of a kli and you have the oil inside and then you have a wick, so it's in this candle or in this bowl or whatever it is, so that the oil is going to be muktzeh once the candle is burning, because if you take away from the oil, you're extinguishing the flame. But if the candle is no longer burning, if the wick is finished, it's all burnt up, so then the oil that's left would, in theory, not be muktzeh anymore, but it would be muktzeh because it was muktzeh at the beginning, at the onset of Yom Tov. That's how Tanakama holds. But Rabbi Shimon says mutar. Right, mutar shem the oil that is left over in the ner or in the kara is going to be asur. But Rabbi Shimon says it's mutar. In other words, he's not concerned there about muktzeh. So you say, Meidami, can you really compare the two cases, like the case of the sukkah that falls down and the case of the oil that's left over in the candle? When it comes to the candle, right? A person's Not that a person is sitting and counting down or when the candle is going to go out, but a person knows from the beginning of Shabbat that the candle is not going to last forever and is going to be oil left over, and therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, it's not set aside in his mind, right? אתה מדבר יושב ומצפה מתי תכווננו. האדם יושב ומצפה מתי תיפול סוכתו. Is a person really sitting and expecting that the sukkah is going to fall down right over Chag? Right, and on that occasion when I went to bench and found that the roof of the sukkah was not there anymore, I was taken very much by surprise. I was not expecting that to happen. So, and therefore, you would expect that it would be muktzeh at the beginning of Chag. So, no, what Rabbi Shimon is talking about is really there that is a sukkah ru'ah. Sukkah is a little bit flimsy to begin with, and you expect, yes, it's quite reasonable to assume that it may fall down on Shabbat. So essentially, we've gone and we've limited it quite a lot. From the beginning of the writer, which said that you can't take a tzim from the sukkah, and Rabbi Shimon says you can. So Rabbi Shimon says you can in the case of A, when it's a sukkah that has fallen down, and B, that it was a sukkah ru'ah to begin with. That's where Rabbi Shimon says it's mutar. Otherwise, he would have similar concerns to Tanakama. So that was the reish of the Breita. We're now about past the third, nearly halfway down the page. Right, the two dots, it says, V'shavin b'sukat ha'chag, b'chag, shi'asara v'midnai le'ah hakol lefitna. So we've been discussing until now a sukkah that is not a sukkah of Sukkot, but it's just a booth that you sit in. Now we're talking about the sukkah of Sukkot. And we see that the sukkah Chag B'Chag is going to be an additional issue, as well as aside from the fact of Soter Ohel, okay? And therefore, both Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon are going to agree that this is going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem, unless you've made it tonight, which we'll talk about. So it says, Mima Hani Ba tonight. Right, that's the question. The question is, how can you have, through this question, we'll understand exactly what the issue is, but how can a Tanai actually help you to take away from the sukkah on Chag? Because what's the problem? The problem here is not just soter ohel. There's a problem of muktzeh in a certain sense, that there is a certain kedusha of the Yatzei Sukkah, that you're not allowed to do anything else with them, aside from the fact that there's a Soter Or. Soter Or is irrelevant here, but there's an independent prohibition. And this is what we learn. It says, Amar Rav Sheshet Mishum Rabbi Akiva, Minayin Yatzei Sukkah Shasarin Kol Shiva. How do I know that you can't take the Yatzei Sukkah, you can't take them away, that they are muktzeh for use of the Sukkah and for nothing else throughout the 7 days of Chag? Shneimar, Chag HaSukkot, Shivat Yamim Lashem. Okay, from the fact that the pasuk says Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim Lashem, B'Tanya Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer Minayin shekshem shachal shem shamayim al chagiga kach chal shem shamayim al sukkah. Where do we know that just as we say that shem shamayim is chal, shem shamayim applies, in other words, that it is hekdesh, that it can't be used for any other purposes, and that applies to the chagiga. How do we know that that applies to the sukkah as well? We're comparing it to the korban chagiga. Talmud lomar Chag HaSukkot Shivat Yamim Lashem. Ma Chag Lashem, Af Sukkah Lashem. In other words, a bit of a from the fact that the pasuk says, kind of like a Gzera Shava, but not exactly. But it's from the fact that the pasuk says Chag, right? Chag Sukkot can relate to the fact that it's Chag Sukkot, but Chag is also hinting, alluding to the Korban Chagiga. And we say that just like the Chagiga is Lashem, just like that is Hekdesh, so to the Sukkah itself is also going to be Hekdesh. Hekdesh in that sense, that it's set aside, right? It's not actually Hekdesh, and that it's not going to Beit HaMikdash, but it's similar. And in the sense that you cannot, there would become muktzeh, meaning it would become set aside for the Sukkah, and not for anything else. So therefore, our question now is as follows. So we understand why you can't take away from the schach of the sukkah and sukkot, but that's learned out. That is learned out from the pasuk. But if that's the case, that it's learned out from pasuk, so how would a t'nai help you? You just told me that the sukkah is Chal Shem Shamayim, and I've just like the Chagiga. I can't make a Tanai and say that it's not. So Marav Menashe, Breder Rava, okay, the Bach has a changes that it's Marav Menashe Mashmuel, but either way, Seifa Atan La Sukkah de Alma. אבל סוכת המצווה לא mani batna. So this is actually, we have to change the way that we read the Beitza. Remember, we had the Reisha that was talking about a sukkah be'alma, sukkah that is not of Chag HaSukkot, and then, right, which is the machloket between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon. Then we say Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon, everybody agrees regarding the sukkah of Chag HaSukkot, and then we say, but if you made it tonight, then everything is according to the Tanai. So we thought that the section about making it Tanai relates to the Seifa, relates to the non-machloket between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon regarding a sukkah of Chag HaSukkot. But now telling me actually no, that was part was maybe put in parenthesis. In other words, the that's going back to the beginning. That's going back to the first din that we had in the Breita, which is the machloket regarding a sukkah ba'alma. Okay, so there. So if you made it tonight, then that would be fine. You could do whatever you want. Right? Amar Menashe Breder Rava Seifa Atan Sukkah. The Seifa Atan Sukkah de Alma. We're going back to a Sukkah de Alma. Ava Sukkah de Mitzvah. Lo mani batnai. But if it's the Sukkah of the Mitzvah, it's the Sukkah of Sukkot. So there you cannot make a Tnai, as we've just seen, as we've just discussed. Let's just see Rashi. Rashi over there on Seifa. He says, Diktani, im hitna alea. Right, the Seifa that says, if you've made a Tnai, asukah de alma kai, val reisha de Beitza kai, kamad. Right, that is talking about an ordinary sukkah, not a halachic sukkah, and then it's going back to the reisha of the Beitza. If Lugubat Tanna Kama of Rabbi Shimon, there we had a machloket drop between Tanna Kama and Rabbi Shimon who said the Knani ain't not linitzim and sukkah, and we said v'ukimna b'shenafla u'mishum muktzeh. So we established what was their machloket about whether you can take eitzim from the sukkah or not. That's a sukkah that's fallen down, and Rabbi Shimon says you can take wood because it's not because of muktzeh, right? מוקצה וכאמר, אם יתנה עליה מבעוד יום, שאם תיפול מחר יסיקנו, הכל לפי תנאו. In other words, based on that, according to Tanna Kama, who says that if you made a Tanai beforehand, your Tanai before Yom Tov was that if it's going to fall down, you're going to take that wood and use it for firewood, so then it would not be muktzeh in that way. But when we're dealing with the sukkah of Chag HaSukkot, we say there, the Tanai is not going to help you. But now the Gemara questions that. It's a sukkah de mitzvah, lo. Is it really true that I cannot make a Tanai for a sukkah of mitzvah? We're going to challenge from the following case. Atanya. Schacha kihilchata v'itra bikramim uvastinin המצוירים ותלה באגוזים שקדים אפרסקים ורימונים ופרחילי ענבים יינות שמנים סרטות ועטרות שיבולים. What's the case? You made a sukkah, sikha kehilchata. Okay, it was a proper, bona fide halachic sukkah, and then you decorated it. Okay, you did not have all these plastic and cardboard cutouts that they make today and that you get from Asherad. Well, how did they decorate the sukkah back then? So you hang up all these things. You try to be kramim uvastinim amtsuyarim. Right, you have all these maybe colorful clothes and colorful sheets and things that are decorative. You hang up all sorts of fruits in it. I don't think they were plastic fruits. I think they were real fruits back in those days. But whatever, that all these things are decorations you hang up. Right, sorts of wines and oils and flowers, things that you put in. They would put in glass. Rashi says put in glass cups for decoration. So all these things, right? Vatarot, shibulim, asur lestapek me'en ad motzei yom tov acharon shel chag. So yeah, we're talking about the decorations, the noyei sukkah, but it says you cannot partake of them, right? They are all muktzeh in the sense you can't take them away until the end of Sukkot. Now here's where the challenge comes in. The imit na'aleim akol lefit na'on. If you had made a t'nai, if you had made a condition, then then everything goes according to the condition, and you could take them. Now the assumption is that we don't distinguish here for the purpose of halacha between the schach itself and the decorations. We say that the decorations are essentially here going to be batel to the sukkah. They're going to be batel to the schach. That's what Rashi says. Akol lefit na'on. Midiktani asur listapek mehen, from the fact that it tells us that asur listapek mehen, so shema mina batli l'ragabei sukkah. We understand that they are batel and they are considered as therefore as part of the sukkah. That's why you can't take them. That's why they would be muktzeh, because it's part of this idea of the whole of the sukkah, which chal shem shemayim ala. V'aveilu sukkah ukamad naimani. So they are considered like the sukkah itself, but we say that the Tanai works. So therefore, it seems to be that the Tanai does work on the sukkah. That's the challenge. I call it not. So Abaye v'Rav Adamritavayu beomer eni boder mehem kol ben hashmashot telochal hakdusha. We're saying that the reason that you could not partake of the decorations is because they have the kedusha, the same kedusha that the sukkah has. So Abaye and Rabbi say, no, what's your t'nai? Where does it work? It works when a person says, "Eini bodel mehem." In other words, I am not separating myself from them. They are not going to become a muktzeh yet. I call bein hashmashot. You make the condition that you want that during ben hashmashot you are not muktzeh them from your mind at all. Now you can do that with the sukkah. You can do that with the decorations. You can't do that with the sukkah itself, because the sukkah itself, once it's bein hashmashot, and it's a safek yom, safek laila, and therefore it might be yom tov. So then, if you were to take that away, that's going to be a problem of soter ohel. So there is a little bit of interplay between the two reasons, but because of that, that's why you can't separate from you can't unmuktzeh, right? You cannot designate the schach during bein hashmashot that you want to use that for something else, because then you'd be soter ohel, and then that would be a violation. But with the decorations of the sukkah, you could do that, and therefore that's how the Tanai for that can work. But what we see from that is that we cannot have a Tanai regarding the sukkah itself. You see Rashi. Rashi says, Abai, getting into the long lines here on Rashi. Rashi says, Abai v'Rava the Amri Tarvayu. The lo damu l'sukkah l'inyan t'nai. In other words, the decorations are not similar, are not the same as the sukkah itself when it comes to this t'nai. Even though we say that they are batal towards it, באומר מבעוד יום איני בודר מהם, מיות כוחי וזכותי בהם, לדן כל שעות אורך של בין השמשות של ערב יום טוב. In other words, the person says that they're making t'nai is that they want to use them, be able to use the decorations already still during בין השמשות before יום טוב. הלקח בשעת ביאת היום שהייתה קדושה צריכה לחול עליהם, לא חלה. Therefore, when בין השמשות, it's shkia, when Yom Tov comes in, and the kedusha should apply, the kedusha does not apply because you've made this tonight that it should not apply. לפיכך, לא יקצה, and therefore it doesn't become muktzeh. אבל עצי סוכה שאינו יכול להתנות עליהם תנאי זה. When it comes to the actual sukkah, you cannot make such a tnai. Because there is no way, there's no possibility that they could not be muktzeh during ben hashmashot, mishum desatar oil, because then it's going to be soter oil, and even Rabbi Shimon holds that over there it's muktzeh, right? So only when it falls down. Ben hashmashot safek yomu, safek yom tovu, right? Ben hashmashot is a safek that it may already be yom tov. So chala kedusha alei. Since you can't make condition, therefore the kedusha is applies, it's chal. And therefore, through this kedusha, it's now going to be muktzeh for all 7 days. All 7 days of Chag. Okay, all of that as we've explained, obviously, is the reading of Rashi. It's the way Rashi understands the Gemara. There are other ways of understanding it and understanding exactly what the Isurim and what the issues are in the other Rishonim, but we are sticking with Rashi for now. The Gemara is going to have one more challenge to this from a case of etrogim. We'll see this tomorrow. But there's going to be a case, a very interesting case where a person has 7 etrogim. You think nowadays people spend a lot of money on the etrog. So you can imagine somebody had a different etrog for every day of Sukkot. But we'll see that case tomorrow. Okay, so we'll stop there, and then B'ezrat Hashem tomorrow we'll be back 8:45. We'll pick it up there, carry on with the next mishnah. Just to let you know, next week there will not be a shiur. Next week I'm going to be away overseas, but we should carry on the week after. So tomorrow as normal.
Thank you, Rav. Thank you.
Have a good day. Be well.
Good day.